Good evening, Democrats and friendly unaffiliateds and other members of the opposition. I'm Vicki Shea. I am the chair of the Farrington Democratic Club. We are here in the Farrington Gathering Place, which is the Homeowners Association building, and we're also on Zoom. So just 4 quick reminders for the in-person audience. First of all, please turn off your cell phones. Second, please don't throw out the beverage cups. They're hard plastic and we wash them in the dishwasher between meetings. So don't throw them away. They'll be back in their plastic life. To ask a question towards the end, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone so that everyone can hear easily, including the Zoom audience. Okay, so no matter how loud you think your voice is, it's not loud enough and our ears are older than we think they are. And let's see, you don't need to put the chairs up at the end of the meeting. We hire someone to set them up and then close up the building. And for anybody on Zoom, you can type your question into the chat box and then they'll be read out so everybody can hear the question. We were going to have one of our board members, Rose Krasno, introduce our speaker, but she is snowbound in Pennsylvania. So I decided to go ahead and read the introduction that she had prepared about our speaker, who I asked to lurk here because we're using all of our chairs. After graduating from Vanderbilt and getting a law degree from the University of Virginia, Bob became a career Foreign Service officer, serving in China and NATO and other overseas posts. In 2000, he was named the ambassador to Turkey. He then became Director General of the U.S. Foreign Service, winning 2 national awards for his efforts to reposition the Foreign Service to meet the challenges of the 21st century. In 2008, he became the president of IREX, an international development NGO, spearheading its expansion to reach more than 125 countries worldwide. Not surprisingly, he has published numerous articles, blogs, and opinion pieces on diplomacy and foreign policy. Clearly, we are very fortunate that he chose to retire in Farrington and that he agreed to speak to us tonight about foreign aid, about this president's approach to governance, and anything else that's on his mind. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Robert Pearson.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here, I'll tell you. It is a great pleasure to be here and have a chance to talk to you. And I will address the USAID issues and I will address other issues. And just to be clear, all of these opinions are mine only. I'm not here on anybody else's behalf. In January last year, January 25, Trump's 5th day in office, he effectively destroyed USAID. This was America's most powerful agency for solving the world's most serious problems, to build better lives and to show that America cared. The result was to dramatically benefit our most powerful adversaries in the world, China and Russia, and directly damage our relations with the developing world, Africa, Asia, Latin America. There was a memorial wall in the USAID offices in Washington. It listed 99 people, names of 99 people who had sacrificed their lives on behalf of their country in service to USAID. That wall was taken down, and now it's disappeared. In the process, Musk's teams gutted the USAID offices. So for me, I think this is the single most powerful self-inflicted injury in American history on our basic civilian interest to help the world grow and prosper. As the world's largest aid agency for over 70 years, USAID has worked to win friends, save lives, do good, provide disaster relief, and protect against starvation, chaos, and terror. Put in charge of the future of USAID, Elon Musk sent the first weekend in February of 2025, destroying the offices of USAID. He said publicly that he had spent the weekend feeding USAID through the quote wood chipper unquote, rather than going to quote some great parties unquote. He claimed he was going to save $2 trillion out of the $5+ trillion federal budget. I'm sure you all remember that famous claim. He then later reduced that claim to $150 billion, which is a lot less than $2 trillion, right? And finally, the records show that perhaps $58 billion was taken out of the federal budget. Now, we think that's a huge number, which from our perspective, it is a huge number. But in the federal budget, it was equivalent to less than a penny. If the federal budget were $1, that $58 billion was less than a penny of that budget. We surrendered to Beijing's propaganda and their massive funding. We surrendered to Russia's subversive policies and its mercenaries. And I think you all know, we all share, that the developing world is growing much more rapidly than the so-called developed world. By the end of the 21st century, 40% of the world's people will be African. 40%. Why? Because their median age is 19. And ours is somewhere in the high 30s or low 40s or even above that. So all those people want to marry, they want jobs, they want their children to have educations, they want a home, they want to build wealth, they want to enjoy the things that they have seen the developed world enjoy. We are doing practically nothing to help them. We are doing practically nothing to help them. In international diplomacy, there is no vacuum. If a country gets up and leaves the table, another country sits in the seat. And we have given up our seat. For years, as you also probably know, people back home were told that as much as 25% of the federal budget went to foreign assistance, and that it was a waste of money and didn't help Americans at all. All of it, of course, a total lie. Trump made use of that cultural bias to pretend that he was saving on money by eliminating USAID. In fact, what he did was he cut off America's right arm. If our wish and our determination to help others so that as we grow and as they grow, we grow together. The 2024 budget for USAID was $21.7 billion. This is 0.3% of the federal budget. If the national budget were $1, the USAID budget for 2024 would have been 1/3 of 1 penny. The interest that we Americans paid on the national debt last year, in 2024, in 2024. Now that's the interest. We never paid a penny down on the principal, right? We were paying interest. We paid $881 billion on the interest on our national debt. That $881 billion was larger than the American defense budget. We could have put 40 USAID budgets in $881 billion. When I was ambassador in Accra, a Turkish friend of mine taught me a very nice proverb, a Turkish proverb. It takes a master architect to build a beautiful mosque. It only takes one man with a pick to destroy it. And that is precisely what the Trump administration has done. One arrogant, wholly uninformed, unaccountable, non-government, private entrepreneur, billionaire with no government experience shattered an American masterpiece. Going back to 2004, which was my second year as Director General of the Foreign Service, we devoted an entire issue of our monthly magazine to U.S. State Department and USAID cooperation. Secretary Powell, one of my very favorite people in my whole life, gave us a message. He said that more than 200 participants in the American International Visitors Program, wait for it, had become heads of state or heads of government. Our program. He gave particular attention to a new program in which more than 130 young people from predominantly Muslim countries were studying at American high schools and living in American homes. He highlighted that our American exchange programs worked with 1,500 partner organizations across the United States. And he thanked the more than 80,000 American volunteers who made those organizations work. He closed by emphasizing that the 21st century challenges would require, quote, unprecedented international cooperation. So we were watching America at its best under a Republican president with a Republican Secretary of State to show the world what cooperation could do. The State Department and USAID created a joint council to ensure that there was coordination between U.S. State Department policies and USAID policies. For Americans, the language was perfectly clear. We were dedicated to partnerships of diplomacy, American citizen engagement, and economic development that would carry the world to better ways and better days. And then after my retirement from the State Department in 2006, as Vicki mentioned, for 6 years I headed an NGO in Washington, IREX. At the end of 6 years, we were operating in 125 countries around the world. We used AID funds for many of our projects. We supported freedom of press, exchanges with teachers and health experts, teaching democracy. We supported refugee programs. We widened access to American values and American know-how and expertise. We were in Liberia during Ebola. I had a huge fight with my American staff who had been there for a long time. They did not want to go home. I did not want to lose an American to Ebola in Liberia. So I asked them to leave until we could restore the staffing. We were in Rwanda working on reconciliation 20 years after the genocide of 1994. In Ukraine, we had a contract with the new independent Ukrainian government to work with that country to reform their national library system. Their library system had consisted of what the Ukrainians call communist mausoleums. You had to have a special permit to even get inside the building, even something else to check out a book. So what did we do? We turned every one of those libraries into a community center. We ran farmers markets off the webpage in those libraries. We taught the Ukrainians something they hadn't seen before. And of course, it stayed that way until the Russians took their part of the eastern portion of Ukraine. In Moldova is a little country, or I shouldn't say that in front of any Moldovan. There's a country between Romania and Ukraine. It's a wonderful country. we taught democracy to local leaders. We found a nice, small-sized city. We spent a month interviewing people in that city, casually, but at random, but associating with them and talking to them and asking them whether they would be interested in a project that might explore the uses of democracy. And at the end of that month, we had about 35 people who had raised their hands and were willing to do so. And we called them all together and we told them they had to elect a leadership board of 7 people by secret ballot, something they obviously had never done in their whole lives. And they did it. And then we said, now you have to have a project that will benefit the entire city, and you have to make the mayor agree to it. So off they went, and after some discussion with the mayor, who wished that it had been his idea, he agreed. It was very simple to put windows in the school. These kids went to school in the wintertime with no windows, and they put on, because I saw it, they put on every stitch of clothing a child can put on to be able to stay in that room and take the lesson that they were being taught. We put the windows in that school. And those kids came to school, a comfortable atmosphere, learning, focusing on their learning. And the people who carried this project off came back to us and said, oh, we'd like to make our village, our town, a model town for Moldova. And we said, well, it's not quite that easy. So we began to try to tell them some of the things that they would have to do if they wanted to move that direction. But they were really inspired by a simple exercise in nothing but just community democracy. That kind of experience, which has been, of course, copied all over the world in many, many environments, that kind of experience immensely improved the sense of America's role in the world and our devotion to people's safety and prosperity. And the odd thing is, we all recognize it, I think, the odd thing is that charity is part of our legacy. From the very first days, when the first Europeans landed on the coast of North America, at least I can speak to that, they started helping people build houses, build roads, find land on which that could be productive, building churches, dealing with their problems. And so when de Tocqueville came to the United States in the 1830s, he was amazed at the volunteerism in American society. He spoke about it and wrote about it and bragged about it because it was not anything that he had ever seen in France. After World War I, the United States provided millions and millions of dollars of food and medicine to the people of Europe. More than 20 million Europeans had lost their lives in that war. We helped them restore their economies, their governments. We helped them get back on their feet to see if they could rebuild their lives. After World War II, we spent billions of dollars with our European friends to help them restore democracy, prevent communism from taking over their countries in some cases. Italy is a very good example. And to join a partnership of cooperation. We showed them what was obvious, that if they worked to improve their economies, they would create markets for us. If we worked with them to improve our economy, we would provide markets for them. And so we also created an economic system and an international organization system that would focus on cooperation globally. And it worked. In 1950, the gross domestic product of the entire world was $9.5 trillion. In 2024, by the end of 2024, it was $111 trillion. Now, I would hazard a guess. Never in human history has the world been able to expand its wealth its global domestic productivity by a factor of 12 in 75 years. That's what we did. But we didn't do it alone. We did it in partnership with other people who had the same goals that we had and understood, and we worked together to see how we could increase our mutual wealth. The end of USAID is going to have significant consequences if this previous funding is not restored. You see what I'm talking about. There was a study co-authored by UCLA and a British Research Institute in 2025 that indicated that recent cuts to USAID last year would lead to more than 14 million deaths over the next 20 years. Oh, excuse me, until 2030, excuse me, until 2030. 14 million deaths from now to 2030. And that included 4.5 million deaths of children under the age of 5. The study also indicated that there were 91 million deaths in the years between 2001 and 2021 that were saved as a result of the programs of USAID, including 30 million children. In countries where we had massive USAID programs, the strongest impact was seen in disease areas. Mortality from HIV/AIDS was reduced by 74%. Malaria was reduced by 53%. Other tropical diseases by 51%, compared to countries that didn't allow or weren't able to receive USAID grants. Now, there is possibly some good news. Somebody asked me if I had any good news tonight. I said, yes, I do. I have two pieces of good news. I'm going to start and I'm going to stop. The Congress this month passed a $50 billion foreign assistance bill. A lot of that money goes to military and defense assistance. Trump's budget for global health from the United States was $3.8 billion, which is a pittance compared to the challenge. And so a group of 22 GOP senators and 47 Democrats got together and increased that number by 60% to give us $9.5 billion for global health. It's still less than what we had last year, or 24, but nevertheless, those people were able to make sure that the programs continued to exist, which is very important. The program also boosts funding for democratic programs. The bill sets clear criteria for building democracy, focusing on good government, credible elections, freedom of expression, human rights, and independent media. These are really commendable goals, aren't they? The odd thing is that most of them are the very principles that this administration disapproves of. We should have a democracy building program right here. No funds may be used for abortion, to promote abortion, or gender ideology is their word, or mass migration. And the bill provides for punishing countries from whom there are too many immigrants with an E. And so it's a pressure, of course, for these countries to control their own departure of people. And I don't know how you do that. And I don't know that they know how to do that. Susan Collins and Lindsey Graham were longtime supporters of federal foreign assistance, and they were good negotiators on this bill. So the issue here is whether these promises and these commitments this year will last for another year and beyond that, of course. So we all know, because we're such a young audience, we all know that we have been through many, many times of serious negotiations and differences over what to do to preserve our democracy and to shape the rights and privileges of our country. For all of us who grew up in the 60s, the civil rights movement put us in direct contention with each other about whether all the people in this country were to enjoy all the promises of our Constitution. My part of the 60s, the Vietnam conflict, split the country right down the middle. When I graduated from law school, 1968, some of my friends went to Washington immediately to help draft dodgers. Some of them put on a uniform and went directly to Vietnam. When we met for our 50th reunion, we all sat around for 2 hours and we talked about what everybody had done, and nobody was mad about anybody's other decision. When I was at NATO, I met a really good Canadian diplomat. He had left New York to cross the Canadian border years ago during Vietnam. We've had all those challenges since then: drugs, same-sex marriage, rights of women, all of the kind of exploring the role of women and men in a new society, the fairness of our health system, overseas wars. They all have come into our dialogue now, our moral dialogue, our legal dialogue. This one is different. This one is very different. In this one, we have seen a plurality of voting Americans elect someone who clearly wants total control of all activities of the federal government and the unrestrained right to violate our Constitution, our laws, our devotion to due process, and the rule of law, and preaches hatred and religious condemnation. The administration wrecks our institutions, slanders people who are sworn to judge us fairly, and those who insist on their freedom of speech. Mr. Trump refuses to apologize for his own vulgar racism against a former president of the United States of America and his wife. He refuses to give us any accounting of the investigation into what I call the 2 murders in Minneapolis. One, a mother of 3 children whose background was impeccable, and one, an intensive care nurse, shot lying on his face, shot in the back, unarmed. And no one has told us what is happening to the people who did that. I should say, too, that if you noticed, and there's no reason why you should, but in those photographs of what was going on in Minneapolis, the ICE, I'm going to call them raiding parties, but the ICE groups were armed with weapons that were manufactured for use in intensive inner-city conflict overseas. That's the kind of armaments they were carrying around on the street. Mr. Trump covets lands in countries that he has no right to. He degrades leaders because the only equals he sees are 2 dictators. He scrambles here and there to escape the Epstein scandal, but it's not ever going to disappear. In the face of glaring truth about a warming Earth, he turns to 19th century resources. By the way, if you worry about him, he lives in the 19th century. Look at any legislation that the United States Congress has passed since 1900, and he doesn't support it, right? Workers' rights, Social Security, all of those things, that he doesn't care about them at all. He's a 19th century guy. So those consequences from the global climate crisis and all the consequences I think that generally speaking, we could say they're drawing closer and closer. We see mass corruption for himself, his family, his friends. He benefits directly from actions that are strictly prohibited by the Constitution's Emoluments Clause. He says that he does what his morality tells him to do. Every day, his morality tells him to benefit from unrestrained power without regard for all of those in need of better medical care, millions of dollars kept out of the hands of people who need that care for their children. And by the way, the impact on hospitals in rural areas, if you look at the Southeast, you will see that there are many states here that are faced with the possibility that they're going to have to start closing rural hospitals. So now instead of having to go 20 miles to get medical service, you have to go 100 miles or 150 miles. Doesn't care. I wrote a long Substack. I write a Substack. I wrote a long Substack about what he's done to farmers. He fools farmers with cultural things like I'm gonna take care of you. Other people didn't take care of you. Biden did this and so on and so forth. But he's the guy who offered Argentina $20 billion in free money. That is, it was ours, in free money to boost his standing so he might win the election in Argentina because he's a right-wing guy and Trump wanted him in office. He gave him $20 billion. And the moment the Argentines knew that they had their money on $20 million, they lifted the export tax they had applied to grains. And that same afternoon, within the course of 2 or 3 hours, the Chinese bought between 12 and 20 shiploads of soybeans. And have you read in the paper anywhere that the Chinese have bought even one American soybean since then? No, you haven't. He doesn't care. He gives them something cultural to believe in, and he doesn't care what happens to them economically. So now we've reached a point where I think we can easily say that he's doing everything possible to fix the November elections. He has the so-called SAVE Act, the Safeguard, well, you love this stuff, don't you? The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It's now passed the House. It's in the Senate. It would require registration in person because you have to show American citizenship when you register. So no more mail, no more DMV registration. When you vote, you have to have a photo ID, which North Carolina already does. That would make it a federal standard for every state in the country. And the states are being pressured to reveal their unredacted voter rolls to the Department of Homeland Security, revealing Social Security numbers, everything, which the DHS is going to use, they say, to verify whether you're a citizen or not. So, of course, you know there are problems that immediately arise. There are people who don't have immediate access to a birth certificate, don't know what the process is to get hold of their birth certificates. Older voters are those that are born out of a state. If you live in North Carolina, but you were born in Vermont, you've got to go get that birth certificate from Vermont in order to prove that you can vote in North Carolina. And especially married women with birth certificates that does not show the name of their current legal name. And obviously the purpose of this is to restrict access to the voting booth and create a national standard for people who are eligible to vote, a direct contradiction of a constitutional provision. Our good friend Kristi Noem appeared at a press conference last Friday, and she said that she thought that it was the responsibility of DHS to ensure election security. Okay? She said that it was necessary to ensure, quote, the right people, unquote, were voting to elect, quote, the right leaders. So the fraud that the administration claims about non-citizens voting, we all know, is a complete lie. Records show that the number of non-citizens who vote in American elections is minuscule. The administration is using this threat to daily distort reality in order to prevent millions of Americans from getting to the ballot box. One piece of good news, the bill is subject to filibuster. Modern filibuster doesn't mean that you have to stand up and talk for 36 hours in a row to hold up passage of a bill. It means you decide that you're not going to vote for the bill. Okay? So this will create a negotiation of some sort. The Republicans have to have 7 Democratic senators voting for them before this bill passes. And of course, they are desperately looking for ways around this. But at the moment, it's a veto bill, a filibuster bill, excuse me, and they are going to have to do some negotiating about what to do. So I think that we will all be very interested in how this works. And since the Congress is not in session now, we will still have to decide how they're going to negotiate this bill. And I'm sure the president's going to have a lot to say about that this evening. I have a very good friend, name is Jim Emerson. He grew up in the small town 6 miles from me, and I grew up outside the small town 6 miles from him. We played basketball against each other, and we became good friends from 1961. I was talking to him about what's going on, and he expressed a kind of doubt that we were actually going to pull out of this. And I said, Jim, every generation of Americans has faced some existential challenge of one kind or another. This is our time. This is us in the slot now. And we have to use the courage and the determination and the wit to stop the destruction of this threat. So we are the generation to put together our energy and our commitment to turning back this threat. This is our opportunity. You may not think of it as an opportunity, but this gift has been given to you. And so the only choice we have is to make the best use of it. We are the ones, our institutions are not going to save us. We've watched it for a year. They're not going to do it. The Supreme Court on 2 occasions has pushed back. The tariff thing and the ruling that the administration had not proven that conditions entitled them to put American soldiers into cities like Chicago and Los Angeles and Portland. Those were the 2 victories. Everything else more or less went Trump's way. I know we can do this. I've been confident from the very beginning that with 250 years of figuring it out and managing and going ahead, we can do it this time. You know, I've talked about the literal shredding of USAID, which I personally think is as magnificent an idea and project as the world has ever actually known. USAID, however, was the first bell in the night about what was being planned for our country, our government, and our citizens. So we need to use its enormous legacy and the proof of its value and esteem as a reflection of who Americans are and what America is, to keep taking back what has been taken from us. You know, the children of the next 250 years of the American Republic are calling on us now to save that democracy for them. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions. Okay.
Anybody on this side?
Well, I'm wondering,
Bill.
are we going to be able to reconstitute USAID if the Democrats get control of Congress in the midterms, or if a Democrat is elected to the White House? Or is it so shattered, it's just not going to come back?
I think that there is a, I'll call it an ideological problem as well. USAID officers are also Foreign Service officers, as are USIA officers, as are people in the agricultural service and the commercial service. So they're equal with us in the sense that we are all Foreign Service officers. So if there's any USAID alum here who would like to correct me, please do so. But my general sense, working in the State Department and working with this non-governmental organization using lots of USAID funds, is that USAID's focus quite often is that to do good, to create a better society, to create a better economy is enough. They don't have to change the politics of the national government itself. They're there to make the ordinary people of the world, of that country, escape disease, have more prosperous lives. Whereas the State Department, just because of its mission, is intensely focused on political changes and political achievements. So I do think that it's quite possible that USAID's programs can continue in a future Democratic administration. There'll be a lot of American support for that. But where it will be continued, that is not clear. Legally, the Congress is the only institution that can terminate an American agency. Education, USAID, whatever it is. And they have not done so. So somewhere out there in the ether, legally, USAID still exists. So I do think that it will come back, but I can't say that I think they will simply pop it back up again and start where they were when they were closed.
The recent Supreme Court ruling on Trump's tariffs has been more broadly seen as constraining the president from taking away any powers from Congress that are granted under Article 1 of the Constitution. This ruling presumably also may prohibit impoundment of funds allocated by Congress, such as Trump has done to USAID. Do you think this Supreme Court ruling could be used to resume funding to USAID?
I wish I could say yes, but I don't think it's broad enough to do that. The interesting thing about that decision for me is that the conservative judges split over a doctrine that they themselves invented. The doctrine is that in order for the president to take, I'll call it a novel or large or very unusual new direction, requires that Congress has given specifically clear authority for that to happen. And so in this case, Justice Gorsuch says it's not in the legislation, and so they can't do it. And so the guys over on the dissenting side said that in foreign policy, the president should be given much more leeway than in domestic policy, and that rule which they invented should not apply in this case. Okay, so I think that most of this is going to revolve around economic struggles. He said he was going to impose tariffs because he doesn't need the Supreme Court. That's the first time he has said that he doesn't have to obey the Constitution. First time. the European Union Parliament yesterday voted not to confirm the deal that we negotiated with the Europeans last year. And so that is up in the air, and the Europeans have demanded clarification of what is happening. And I guarantee you there are people around the country and elsewhere who think, well, I'll get my money back. And they walk down to the federal court, file a demand for the refund. So there is a lot of uncertainty around this whole idea, and there's absolutely no willingness, voluntary willingness anywhere to obey what Trump is doing overseas. They are sick and tired of it. And so they decided not to confirm this deal before they find out the clarification that the Trump administration is going to give them supposedly about the money, including the refunds. So we're going to have to wait, but that decision is not broad enough to reestablish AID. I'm sorry.
Less than a week ago, I texted with a colleague of mine. And yes, old people do text. He's 14 years older than me. And I said, the first time that Trump was elected, you said this wasn't the end of the world, which his son and I thought it was, because the US has recovered from many different events over time. Do you still think the same way? And he said, I don't know. This is a historian,
Okay.
Academic. I don't know. There's a civil war, Great Depression, 2 world wars, internment of Japanese population, Red Scare, racial oppression and uprising crises of 60s and 70s, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, etc. The American, quote, democracy, end quote, will survive in a diminished state. If Obama was a democratic peak, Trump is a democratic low. Of course, it is indisputable that Trump is the worst of the worst, but he was also democratically elected. So democracy failed first, and that led to his election. What do you think of that response?
I would just say, since he is a historian and obviously quite well informed, that the founding fathers knew this. The founding fathers said that populism could overtake democracy. James Madison said this. Abraham Lincoln gave a wonderful speech in Illinois when he was 28 years old, in which he said, and I won't try to quote it entirely, but he said, no army of Europe will ever conquer the United States. No army will ever water its horses in the Ohio. Is if we are to survive, we must survive as free people or die by suicide. So that's what I would say to him. I would say, until the last light goes out, there is a candle burning, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to make sure the last candle doesn't go out. And I'll give you one more example, which is a guess in a way. But I read somewhere that when it comes to mass demonstrations, if 4% of a country's population is in the street, that becomes a noticeable working lever on the governance of the country. So for all of you might have been at the first No Kings rally, I think, was it a million plus? The second one was 3 or 4 million. The third one was 7 million. And so the country's population, if you're a mathematician, is 342 million. All we need are 12 million Americans in the street. Okay. And so that's what I would say is the crux of the matter. If we show that we are absolutely determined, and in Minneapolis, unfortunately, with bloodshed, people, ordinary Americans, got out there and showed that they would not stand for it. And they may have decided, but it was a clear defeat for Trump, But he doesn't, as you know, he doesn't apologize for anything. He doesn't give up on anything, even when he just leaves it alone. When was the last time you heard Trump say that he needed to have Greenland? Greenland. They stopped it. That's exactly right. They stopped it. He doesn't say anything about it anymore. There's a French consulate in Greenland's capital now. Other troops are maneuvering in Greenland now from Europe. So it's true that Greenland could be a vulnerable piece of territory. But it is not true that the Russians and the Chinese are sailing around Greenland's coast every day looking for a way to take over. And so there are other things that he does that show you that he can't carry it forward. My own personal opinion about Ukraine. He wants to win that Nobel Prize. He wants to win that Nobel Prize. And do you know that he's got himself in a trap? He can't convince Putin to have a ceasefire. So what does he do to win? He puts all the pressure on Zelensky. You make the concessions. Then we'll have a ceasefire. Then I'll get the $12 trillion deal I've been talking about for the last week. That's the way he operates. So, but does he think now that he's got a chance to do something with Ukraine? He won't do anything for Ukraine, but both Ukraine and the Europeans have said without a solid American guarantee of security, they are not signing the deal. So he's trapped. If he doesn't give them what they want, the Ukrainians, he won't be able to make a deal with Putin, and he can't get Zelensky to give up. So that's an example of how he doesn't give up on his ambition, but he does give up on that particular object now because he can't make anything done. So I would just say that to your colleague that we had this warning. We know what this does. It's now here. The disease is with us. And now we have to, as Abraham Lincoln said, live as free people or die by suicide. And I think that that's why I'm talking to you tonight. I'm not intending to die by suicide. That's not my option.
March 17th is the next case.
Exactly. And I hope that 28, and I hope that every one of you will be out there. But I think that we've seen that happen before, and we've seen it make a difference before. And I think that after all, it was us, our forefathers, who carried the revolution to the end. You probably know that in March of 1783, the American army revolted. Its leaders came to Washington and said, "We have not received one penny of our pay since we joined this army. We have not seen one promise of those pensions that we were told would be coming for service to the United States, and we are quitting," including his senior officers. And he said, wait a minute. We are in this to win. We are in this to make a new nation. If we quit now, it will never happen. And all the things that you thought the Brits might do to you, they are absolutely going to do to you. You need to buckle up, get out there, and let us finish this war. And 7 months later, Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown. So that's all I'm saying. That's what we are. That's what we can do. So your friend, it's okay. He's entitled to his opinion, but mine, I know where I'm going to be. Okay, good.
Hi. Okay. You're very knowledgeable, and these are very important issues that you're discussing. But I have a question for Vicky Shea. We have an election next month, and why aren't we talking about the candidates for the election next month?
So the Democratic Party does not choose between two Democrats competing in a primary.
Here, so we can talk to them. I think that's the topic we should be discussing now.
What I think is going to be important is sending Roy Cooper to the Senate, because that's one more vote for the Senate, re-electing Anita Earls to the North Carolina Supreme Court, which is also going to be a part of the firewall. There are going to be 3 North Carolina Court of Appeals candidates on the ballot. There's only one primary now, but there are going to be 3 in the fall. And I also would say that this is a club. We are a club, just like the Garden Club and the Train Club and the Mahjong Club. And if anybody wants to get active, the way to do that is through the Democratic Party. We don't have the legal standing. We don't have the money. We have the mission of being a social networking and an educational facility. But I'm also the first vice chair of the Chatham County Democratic Party. And anybody who can't physically go to a No Kings rally, we have things for you to do in the office. There are things you can do seated. There are things you can do inside and not braving the elements. So I don't usually push the party in here because we're just a club. But I think that is the mechanism that everybody in this room has to make a difference that we can. We're not going to change Trump into non-Trump, but we can make Chatham County and North Carolina adhere to the principles of democracy.
The party has also offered lots of opportunities to meet candidates. They had speed dating and other things to meet candidates. And yes. One more.
So Bob, in addition to the things we've just talked about, like the March 28th rally, what do you see as some of the most important things individuals can do to make a change?
I never thought anyone would ask. I'm going to give you a short list, and I'm going to add one item to it. But the short list was put together by an NGO in Washington called Steady State. Steady State is comprised of about 350 retired national security officers, CIA officers, USAID officers, State Department officers, and they write a Substack every week at least, but their people are very prominent in the Substack world. So here's what one of their articles said. 1, stay in touch with your elected representatives, the 2 senators and the 1 representative from the House of Representatives, regardless of their opinion. Regardless of their opinion. Make sure that when you talk to the person who handles the comment from you, that they have the comment down clearly where you stand and that they will report it to their representative. They keep records of pro and con and this and that, and you may not think that you're making that much of an impression, but their first recommendation is get in touch with them and stay in touch with them and make sure that your views are being held. If they're positive, that helps them. If they agree with you, if they're negative, maybe it will show them that they're on the wrong track. No? Secondly, obviously, donate to the people you like. Make sure that they have the resources to carry on their campaigns. Personally, there are a lot of people across the country I would love to support, but I'm focusing on North Carolina. I want North Carolina to go blue, and that's why I'm doing that. But it takes money, and that's their second suggestion. Third one is interesting because I don't think it's needed for this group. It's stay informed. Stay informed. Be sure you know what's going on. Be sure you're aware of the issues that have to be addressed. And the next one is to participate in local politics. Go to this county commission meetings. Go to the school board meetings. Serve on boards. Volunteer to help a candidate. You may think that somebody else will do this, but they may think that you're going to do it. So that's a good suggestion. Get yourself involved in the activities that might make a difference. They don't ask you not to talk to people who oppose your point of view. They say, see if you can create a constructive conversation with somebody. I know from my experience as a diplomat, if you ask somebody, even if they're angry, if you ask them to explain exactly why they believe what they believe, they will tell you, and they will be enthusiastic about telling you that. And sooner or later, something will pop up and you'll say, yeah, and I agree with that. So asking somebody else in a constructive environment, or just to explain why they believe what they believe, and then ask them, well, did you see what happened last week? Or did you see this or you see that? You get a conversation going. So it's a learning process, but it's one of the important points they make. Couple more quick ones here. But Janet, I know you asked that question. I want to make sure and give you a good answer. Okay. Take care of yourselves was the advice. Take care of yourselves. News can be brutal. It can really turn you upside down. It can really turn you upside down. I don't know how you felt the morning they killed the days they killed those two people in Minneapolis, Renee and Good, exactly. But in the name of the second, yeah, thank you. But the day they were killed, that sent a tremor, a shock through the entire 342 million Americans when they heard that news. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that I think we may have to confront. We've had things happen that we did not even imagine could happen. The advice, don't be overwhelmed, maintain control. And keep in mind that you are benefiting yourself and you are benefiting your country. Not resisting, of course, which happened in Germany, ultimately in the 30s, when finally reached a point where no one could actually oppose the government without subjecting themselves to imprisonment or murder. Not resisting often leads to brutal and unthinkable results. Who is steady state? The two authors of this short list of 7 things, you'll be surprised to find out, are 2 clandestine CIA officers who served overseas for years, who knew how life was lived inside and out. And their advice is get involved, stay in the fight, don't give up, don't be overwhelmed. There's no magic solution to this. And go to the No Kings rally.
Actually, we have one comment on the Zoom from a person, and they say, thank you so much for describing so eloquently and yet understandable the situations that have caused us so much anxiety.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much.